Scope.
we're sitting here.
We're watching the stream on John's screen right there. It's like, hey, we're right here.
We're right here if you want to watch, you know.
That's real life.
Yeah, real life is scary, I understand. He's over there watching us while we're right behind him.
Sound the video good.
Now it's starting Super Serial stream.
Oh. I should just say things like, John, what are you working on? And wait, you know, the required 5
John,
seconds.
Do the other one. The other arm looks better.
So, anyway, as you can tell, Tim and I are a little jaunty already. We both had not enough sleep for the amount of work we're trying to put in today. Also, just as a preamble, if you see me kind of do this, or a little pause, I've just had this nausea thing that's been sticking with me since this morning, which hasn't been fun, but I am here kicking butt on work with the help of Max helping me out with some things also today. And Tim today, we're working on testing all different kinds of things and doing all different kinds of stuff. I actually started writing up the update for today, and it's like there's all these different parts that we're working on right now. So, let's just jump into the top 10-ish because these are the highlights for the week. And we've also got a gift from Apollon. I keep wanting to call him Apollon, that we're going to open up at the end. Starting off, progression. So Christina's been working on the progression system. Matt's been helping her. What did I say specifically? Matt's more functionality with the ability system to support leveling of components and unlocking components based on players' progression. That's going through a bit of design. I think she said she had something up for review this morning. So we're progressing.
Yeah, we had a big
progressing well on that.
We had not a big chat. We had a chat about it for a bit, either before or after lunch. I don't remember, but you know, just talking about how we track all the stuff that the players do and the context that we put it in terms of the rewards and the progression that you get out of it, and you know, scoping it for what subset of the features do we want for beta 1 versus launch, or versus even beta 2 or 3 as that stuff progresses.
Yeah, and this is actually a good segue just to talk about how we're, you know, making sure that we don't scope for things we don't necessarily need. You know, there's a lot of things that we do want to track for progression, and there's a lot of things we want to track overall. I mean, we're basically creating the NSA progression system here. It's kind of like when I look at the notes and stuff, it's like we're tracking this, we're tracking that, we're tracking this. And all of this is obviously to unlock components so that players can progress, but we also need to be able to change how fast you progress. It's one of the things that we'll need for beta, because we'll actually need to test the system. We'll need players to get in and actually progress in a very short period of time, simply to test different parts of the game.
So just to be clear about that, during the Kickstarter, we talked about, you know, like you'd get like daily rewards from your king, or you know, patriarch or matriarch or whatever, and that ties heavily into the progression system. But if we just want to do a test together of like, hey, all you ITs and alphas, help us hop in and test the progression system. Like, we don't want you running around and doing shit for 24 hours before we see if it works. We need to be able to, like, all right, you know, you guys go have a big 20-minute fight, and then at the end of that fight, we'll run progression and see what happens. So we need to be able to sort of scale the time frame that we do this stuff against, so that we can do good tests and make sure it all works well.
Next up, tech for NPCs. So Colin's been working for the last couple of weeks on, he set up the NPC server, which will control their, I want to say, oh, we lost Max. We don't want to totally lose Max. Don't die over there.
I was trying not to interrupt the stream.
It's me, man. Come on. Let's see, Colin, NPCs, NPC server, that's where I was at.
There's a sentence in here somewhere, guys,
there's a sentence there. So next thing he's working on right now, capability to display text from a signpost NPC, so that you can walk up to it and we can determine what that person actually says to you. Right now, one of the things you'll see, did I remember to put it in here? Oh, I didn't put it in here. So Michelle's been working on some concept art for NPCs. One of the things I'd like to do, it's going to be a little bit of a balance trying to do animations and hooking up new character art, because those both go through Scott. but we have always wanted to do some kind of just basic clothing and stuff. I think Michelle has specifically said we need to get some, some cleavage outfits and other things. So if you just want to walk around just looking fancy or pretty. So one of the things she's been working on concepting is, I think this week I'll have images of some male generic kind of clothing that isn't combat themed. And then these will be based on kind of basic.
And to be clear, this male clothing is going to have cleavage.
Oh no, that'll be for the females. Did I make it sound like the males?
Yeah, now I'm disappointed.
Okay. Well, maybe she can work that in there for a little bit of chest, or we'll do the short shirts for the little 6-packs on the NPCs.
Nice. Yeah. That way I can get my Lucha Pen 6-pack out there.
Yeah. The cool thing is we're doing these based kind of in a generic manner, so that we can kind of shift them to different realms more in like the designs or the cloth or the colors, small things, so that we don't have to recreate some kind of basic outfits from scratch every single time. But I should probably put that in the top 10. I forgot all about it.
Somewhere in this, are we going to tie this to NPCs?
NPCs, yeah. Well, that is it. The NPCs need to have clothes.
Oh,
and we want to
okay.
make them look different.
Okay.
Make them
so
look
the clothes
different
are for the NPCs. You're not going to talk to the NPC, and they're not going to give you clothes that you can put on.
Did I make it sound like that?
You didn't make it sound like anything.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm a little wonky today with the.
All right.
It's the nausea, man. The headache and all
And
that.
so some of the cool stuff we're doing with that is we've also discussed in terms of, for our internal office use, stuff like if we just need to test, hey, let's render a bunch of dudes on the client right now, we have to spin up a bunch of bots, and somebody who
Servers.
knows how to run the bots have to do all that. So if we just have an NPC box that we could say, hey, spawn a bunch of NPCs and have them do this behavior, it'll help guys like the client engineers stress test the client without having to spin up a bunch of servers and a bunch of bot boxes and all of this.
Yeah, I mean, literally what Dave's been doing with the character manager.
And so we're also going to be building into it some functionality just to help us iterate, develop, design, and build faster.
I want to talk about client stability. Take 3.
Yeah. So
You're a good person to talk about that.
Last week, a bunch of you guys were on all the stuff we've been doing on Wolf here, and that's a fairly old-ish build. And we got it to a pretty good state that we were happy with it. We knew sort of the limitations of it. We knew the issues, but in general it was pretty good, but it was old. And so last week we started working on a new bleeding edge version for the big bot battles and ongoing testing, betas, alpha tests, all that stuff, so that we could show you guys the new latest and greatest. We bumped into some client stability issues. Specifically, we were seeing some lockups, so that's been an ongoing thing over the last week. George spent some time working on that. Dave helped him out a little bit, and we knocked down the frequency of these issues significantly. But it was a bit of a hack, a bit of a band-aid, and we knew that going in. We just wanted to sort of stabilize the client. We didn't get it stabilized in client to do a test last weekend. We didn't get it stabilized in time to do a test this weekend. But we're actually probably after this going to be doing some more testing on it, hopefully for something next week. No promises there, though. But through all of this, we just determined that let's go ahead and bite the bullet and do the proper fix. So we've already rolled on to the next step of this, which is pulling off the Band-Aid and doing things right.
Superman bug. This was actually a fun one that we spent a lot of time theorizing on what could be causing it and jumping around randomly, just trying to figure out if we could repro it. The basic of this is if you saw, probably if you were in any of the bot tests where we had 1,000 of them on the screen or more, you'd see some guys kind of look like they were hovering,
they're laying down
feet.
with their stomach on the
yeah,
ground.
they were kind of doing this and then still swinging their axe or whatever they had in their hands. And I think basically I actually put the details in here because it was kind of interesting, and I'll go ahead and read that. Each animation has a priority. In this case, jump has priority over land. The issue was one of timing, where in some cases the jump animation hadn't blended out before the land animation had blended in, therefore trumping the land animation and getting stuck in fall. So it was basically, I think as Andrew was putting it, it's probably 3 lines of code. We just got to find what 3 lines and where they are. So this was actually one of the harder things to find, and Brad and Andrew were able to figure it out, and it was just kind of a fun item to find, and it's honestly one of those things I like doing in game development. Like, okay, well, there's a weird thing happening. What could it be?
Yeah.
Animation system support. So Bull set it up so that we can change the animation, the master animation asset sheet per channel through the editor, and this is basically just it's a small amount of work, but saves us the possibility of basically clobbering work on the incorrect channel at any given point. And the animation sheet is actually just one giant spreadsheet that contains all the different, when I talk about anim sets or Frankensteining pieces together, we literally kind of say like, okay, the Arthurian male, you know, when he's running uses this set of animations, when he's walking uses this set of animations, and that could include things like, oh, this arm, these legs. So all of that is controlled in that sheet. So it's a fairly important piece of information that we have to take care of when we're using it. You want to hit any of these? Do you have any favorites? I usually end up just talking through
Yeah, I
them
mean,
all.
I don't have much input on the animation stuff.
Siege battles. That's a quick one. Ben and Mark are working through some of the design for the Beta 1 Siege battles and are looping in engineers at this point. These things.
So this is stuff that we've been talking about in the documents that we've been releasing weekly. So if you guys have been reading those documents, we've been talking about siege battles. You know, we're continuing to work on the design for that stuff.
And these things are twofold. One, they're to test tech, but make things fun as well. They're meant to be games that are fun to engage in, but also test the tech that we're building. And each one of them just kind of iterates upon the previous one as we just add in another feature. Improvements for setting player stats, number 7. The way we store and edit stats used in character creation wasn't ideal and can produce incorrect or confusing results. So Caleb did a bit of work on it so that stats used for character creation exist in a spreadsheet, like we do for items, which allows Ben to easily edit them quickly. So this is actually a fairly important thing for testing, just so that we can make quick edits. Oh, the wife is shooting me like 5 images randomly. So that we can test things quickly, change stats while we're actually testing, and make kind of just get the feedback we need. Oh, if you're running, 1.2 meters, 1.3 meters, how long does it take you to get to A to B? How fast do you get into combat? Little things like that have a very big impact on the feel of a game, so we want to be able to edit and control those fairly quickly. New in-game options menu. So one of the great things about having a new engineer on the team, and AJ, is that he's been able to put some time on the options menu that we've had up for quite a while, and I don't think it's gotten any love for quite a while. So he's been
I think like a year ago, Dave made a pass at looking up a bunch of graphics options, and
so
it's just sort of sat there.
Yeah, so he's had some time to give it a little bit of an overhaul, fix some bugs. The sliders actually, I think the sliders only had like a visual increment at the end and the middle, so now they actually have increments and stuff like that on it. This is an art and tech one, number 9, first pass empath component VFX. So doing this, we use our tagging system, and it's a weighted tagging system. So Ben goes into the components, adds tags to the components. Mike hopefully uses the same types of names. This is where it gets important, what names everything uses. And I was listening to them discuss this the other day. And then he does that with the tags, the VFX, so that when you're casting a heal or something, it will look for the appropriate tag for like lower arm heal, or more specific to that
it tries
component.
to find the most specific thing, and so it says like, okay, this is if Cross could go in and make an effect that's tagged for like healing component plus ball component plus extra radius component
and
plus,
arm and
cast by the empath, and so if you do that, it'll use that. And then if it doesn't find that match, maybe it'll find one that's just like a generic healing spell, and so there's sort of these degrees of specificity for the effects.
As they're just starting on this piece, and this will test some of the tech from Gabe to get VFX on your target. Previously, we only had them on your character, the person who was actually using the ability. But we did the same thing for like the arrows. So it would you'd pick the arrow component, and then you'd say, you know, blazing fire. So it would go and say, okay, I need to find a VFX that has arrow and blazing fire on it, and if it found that, then it would pull that VFX. And just as likewise, if we want to just have a generic arrow trail, it could just say arrow. That would mean that any arrow component that was used would get the same trail. And it allows us to just kind of keep working down from generics to more specific.
Right. The advantage there is we can, as developers and designers and artists, use a wide brush and sort of paint a whole category of abilities with sort of a generic thing, so that if you see somebody doing an ability, you can know, like, hey, that's a healing spell, or that's a fire spell, or, you know, that's an offensive or a defensive spell or whatever, and then later go in and you know, give them some specific personality after
the TDD version of
yeah,
this.
exactly.
Yeah. And this was one of the things where I had to play producer on, where like Ben worked out all the permutations and all the possibilities that Mike would have to deal with, and I was like, okay, let's not make Mike's head explode right away, let's break this down in phases. So if you ever see me communicate this in phases, it kind of starts out, each class starts out with like a generic pass of things, sounds and VFX and animations, and then goes into a more specific version, and that's just something we'll, you know, keep working on over time. Wood resource nodes. So one of the things, we're not committing to all the types of tech that we would need for gathering for Beta 1, like the bubble tech for mines, or chopping down a tree and gathering wood from it. So in lieu of that, what we're working on is some just visual, just some models that represent, hey, I can go over to this, in this case, tent. I can see it on Dion's screen over there. And as I go over to that tent, we'll make sure that it's very clear, like that, you know, this shape of tent, you know, that you can get wood from. So just like you would see a forest over there, you would go over and see this tent and go, okay, I'm going to go gather wood from it. And then when you get closer, you'll see like it'll have different like colors of wood or something to represent different types of wood. We'll do the same thing for the cloth and the leather. The mines, our original plan was just a similar type of concept, but as you've seen from previous updates, we've realized we could actually use the portaling tech and pop players into a mine. So we're going to use that for rocks and ore. I'm trying to think, is there another resource I'm missing? No. Okay, so in this update, I'll have shots of some of the work that Dion's doing that she's streamed over the last couple of weeks, and then we'll move into cloth and leather. Animation. So last week, Sandra's been working on the shield blockout, and has now progressed through the kind of polish pass of all those animations. And typically our polish pass ends with the skirt and cape animations, as those are very much secondary animations that go with the primary focus. And if you're at all curious about the difficulty of figuring out these different combinations of holding the weapons, I wrote up a lengthy article for the newsletter where I kind of talk about how we Frankenstein one arm onto another, and basically how we use the tech well.
Correct me if I'm wrong, we do something similar to what we do with like effects, where we sort of have this priority system of picking like the most specific animation. I think we do that for animations too.
No,
okay.
it's you know, it basically, there's a anim set. I'm trying to visualize this in the sheet that'll say, okay, I've got a left-hand sword and a right, I'm sorry, in this case it'll be left-hand shield and right-hand sword, and we just say these are the animation clips that you'll use when you're walking, running, swinging, and everything like that.
Cool.
And I think they're all, what they're right now based on, I believe, is stance. And so if we ever want to make, like, the Vikings have a specific set of animations from the Arthurians when they're using the same weapons, we would just create another segment in that sheet that tells what clips to play. And the cool thing about that tech is that it allows us, in this case, she's piggybacking off the previous work where that we had animated holding, say, a mace, right, and then holding a sword and making these swings. And so right now what she's doing is just working with the shield to get that out of the way and do the movements that would pair up with it. So when we do something like, say, a spear, you can get the shield out of the way. And what we're doing right now is a fairly we're trying to get a pass on all the weapons for Beta 1. So we're not doing like all the different variations. Plus, we want to get a lot of feedback on just how things look and feel. So it's kind of silly for us to do like all the different types of swings and make all the different permutations we want to. Once we feel like we're kind of honing in on like, yeah, this feels good, the timing's good, and everything, and we know what we're doing, then we can start working on permutations. Like if you've got two swords, maybe it's not like this, maybe it's like this, things like that. The realm portal materials. So we're on our last realm portal marker with the TDD. What these guys are used for is during beta 1, we need to be able to get you guys around the world really quickly. We need you to be able to get to islands. We need you to know which island is available to actually teleport to. So the art side of it is a marker representing the home island that you go to. So in this case, we don't want you. We have a very generic portal that's basically a glowing rock. With some VFX around it, that the idea is like, oh, I see that over there, I'm going to go use that portal. We don't want players running, you know, our draw distance is really far, so we don't want you to spend time running all the way across the island only to find out that that portal only goes to, say, the TDD home island, and you can't use it because you're not a TDD. So these guys are very specific. They're meant to be that realm's visual marker to go to a safe island. But then they also have 4 material variations so that we can use them with the control point tech, so that if you take over the surrounding terrain, that portal will visually change to look like, say, the Vikings, if it's a TDD one in this case, that the Vikings have actually owned that terrain around it. So you'll see several different material variations from John in today's update. Last one, minus the one I forgot, which was Michelle's concept art. Updated character select screens. So for beta 1, what we want to do is get some of the cool stuff we have in the patcher, where we've got like the shifting images and stuff like that, the animated images, and do something kind of nice in our in the patcher for the character select screen. But using video is fairly non-performant and more expensive. So what we're doing is James is, I think, kind of teaching himself over there how to do it in code. So Michelle's been giving him a bunch of painted up concepts, and then he's been mixing them together, and it's actually pretty cool already. Like you move the mouse around, everything shifts, there's little light beams and everything, and it's all done in code, so it's pretty cool. And then
the other thing we were going to talk about, which was the bot battles.
Bot battles, yeah.
So we talked about it a little bit in terms of like the stability stuff we've been working on in the last week. Anybody who was in the Wolf Ear stuff that we did, I think we did 2 weekends of that. Did we do two weekends of Wolf Ear and a bunch of stuff during the week? If you were in any one of those, you saw us go up to probably about 1,000 bots. Last week, again, we were working on new bleeding edge stuff. And the big thing you may have heard us talk about, the LOH stuff, large object heap stuff. It's a specific type of allocation that was preventing us from getting more than about 1,000 bots on Wolf Ear. We think we tracked the main issue there down. There's a couple smaller other issues that are not quite as big a deal, but we got the big one, we think. Do we want to say how specific do we want to be about numbers there?
Over a certain number.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we got over.
We got a lot.
We got over
more,
2,500 bots, running great.
ARCs.
ARCs, yeah,
right,
ARCs
yeah,
now.
ARCs. Sorry. We
just started using that term.
Okay. We got over 2,500. What was the automated remote client?
Yeah, I just was trying to run that through my head. I can't remember.
I think that's it.
Yep.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we got 2,500 of those. Which again, if you were on Wolf Ear, we were getting about 1,000. You might have seen us push it to 1,200, but it didn't look great. Wormling was running 2,500 plus fantastically. You could run through it. There were none of those like crazy spikes where like the fireworks would go up for a couple of seconds before they exploded and all of that. Like it was real smooth. So we're excited, really excited to show you guys that progress, because we're really excited to see it ourselves. So as soon as we can get the client good enough that the client is a good experience, we will be thrilled to bring you guys in.
Yeah, and on top of that, Dave's made a lot of improvements in character memory, so that we've been able to get a lot more unique characters on screen.
Wolf Ear could only do 500.
It was around 500, I believe.
Yeah. So the the bots are all sort of clones of each other. So we've been working on, I think Mark calls it the Technicolor.
Yeah, the
arcs.
Technicolor bots. Arcs.
And so we recolor all of the arcs so that they get unique models and materials and stuff like that, and so they're not clones. That way there's no cheating or anything like that in terms of like replicated guys. We can't quite do 3,000 unique characters.
Yeah, there's only so much memory we actually want to take up.
We doubled the number from what it was on Wolfier at 500 to 1,000 is I think where we're at now. And so that's also another thing that we're really excited to show off is the Technicolor arcs. But
we'll get
there. Fingers crossed, we get this client stability stuff, and we'll bring you guys in some more, and you'll get to see the coolness.
If you look at the newsletter, there's a screenshot in the newsletter of all the bots arcs. It's going to take me a while to not use that. Tim actually wrote a fun couple of scripts that allow him to. So we actually, how many did we put in when I was like, that's not fit? Was it 1,500?
No, it was 2,800. And I had like, or it was like 2,700. No,
it was a lot.
It was 2,800, and I had 2,700 on screen.
Tim told me that there was a number of them on screen, and I looked at it and I was like, dude, that's not right. That's not that number. And I kind of took a cluster, counted it.
We argued over this a bunch, and finally we were like, the only way we're gonna come to any kind of concession
I'm gonna count.
is to count them. And so Tyler grabbed Max and like took a
drew
screenshot of all of them and just drew
and we
a
just
line.
started dotting them and counting, and I think we it was something like 1,200 or something.
You guys got up to like 1,600, I think.
The point was, it was not the number that Tim had said, and what we learned was that the bots will move around and eventually find a target and then start hitting that target, but then another guy will come up behind him and another one behind him, and eventually you get these little clusters. And then what was happening is they were all continuing to spawn.
Yeah, as we would load new arcs in, the arcs would come into the middle of some of those packs and not be able to move out, and so you'd have this teeny tiny little point that had like 300 guys standing on top of it, and it would just look like one or two guys.
Yeah, it would only look like a couple. And one of the things that we did also, you'll see it in the next build when we do the test. There's a lot more information of how many are unique, how many are in your frustrum on screen, actually in this case, and
it'll tell you how many are on the server. It'll tell you how many your client knows about. It'll tell you how many your client are rendering, and we should probably get Dave to put like that unique number on that panel as well.
Oh, we don't have that one on there?
No, it's on a different panel, and that panel gets turned off outside of Hatchery.
Yeah. So Ben also noticed that he brought his camera in real close to his guy and moved around. He was like, okay, 200, 215, 200, and then it would suddenly jump to like, oh, there's 500 guys on screen. You
would literally take like one step, move like a quarter of a meter, and suddenly there would be like 600 more guys in your frustrum.
Right. So the server knew they were there. The server was doing its job.
The client
was doing its job. The
client was rendering. Right. They just weren't visible by the human
by naked eye. It wasn't as impressive. I was like, wait, we got to. So Tim's.
I wrote a little thing that would just like make them go into a grid.
Yeah.
And so then we could just say, all right, there's 50 guys on this side, 50 guys on that side. That's 250 guys. Or
so if you look at the screenshot in the newsletter, you'll see them all kind of gridded out, and it gives you an idea of how many we're actually rendering and tracking on the server as well. So very, 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 very cool tech.
And a big part of that motivation is the number of people we have put on a server. Even the guys that have been on Wolfier is phenomenal. It's really great. We're really proud of it. And the number of guys who are actually rendering on the client isn't quite representative of the amount of work we're doing. And so we want to be as honest as possible and not cheat or cut any corners, because when it comes down to it, we want you guys to be able to put 3,000 guys in a fighting over your guild city or your capital or a platinum mine or whatever. And we need to be prepared for that. And so some of the numbers weren't quite as accurate, and we didn't think they were quite how we wanted to represent things. And so we're doing this so that we can, with 100% confidence and 100% honesty, say
show you
we have
how many
3,000 unique guys that are
we're
clones.
We're not at 3,000.
We're getting there, though. That's what we're working towards. And so a lot of this work has been so that we can be, so that there's no ambiguity there.
However, just to be clear, Beta 1's goal was 500.
Right.
Yeah. So we're doing okay. All right. I'm done with the top 10. We should do a few.
Do you want to do this first or Q&A first?
We should probably do the Q&A first, because then I'm going to bow out, because Max is going to open that up.
Right.
All right. So, give us your questions, folks, and these guys will give you some answers. Direct programming questions at Tim, and art questions at Tyler. And if you have design questions, hang on to them and post them on the forums, or save them until we have a designer on.
Oh, we did mention we're updating the Beta 1 chapter. Did I mention that?
I don't think we did.
Okay. We're just like last week, we are updating the... James, are they up? The chapters? He's like 5 feet away and can't hear me. So
well, soon to
they
be
should
updated.
be up. There should be an update for the Beta 1 documentation. Should be up on the website now.
All right. Odilvik asks, for the nauseous feeling Tyler, if a player is on a boat between islands, will the camera go up and down, left and right, back and fro, side to side to simulate waves?
We're even going to have fishy smell-o-vision.
Yeah, we're not that. We haven't even. We're not that far. We haven't even thought about that concept.
And side.
I don't think that would be a good idea, unfortunately.
Side to, okay.
You're not helping.
Rec asks, Friendly Fire would like to know, specific to the Realm Honors stretch goal, how will heroism be measured?
No, that's a design question.
That's a design question.
I don't know. That's a bad question.
Swazi asks, I haven't heard much about the seamless zone transition tech since it was tested a while back. Have you guys managed to get this up and running to your satisfaction?
We actually had a discussion about it either earlier this week
Yeah, we brought it
or
up
later
again. That
last
we need to get
week.
back to testing it again.
Yeah, it was when we last left it off. There was one bug that we needed to knock out, where like if a bunch of guys zoned all at the same time, it could cause some problems on the physics server. I think we've sort of incidentally fixed that bug with a bunch of the client and server stability push we've been doing the last couple of weeks.
And by problem, we mean like as you're crossing, right?
Well,
like your guy.
Yeah.
Or was there
If like
something else you were
no, it was
thinking
if we took like 10 guys and ran them across that zone boundary at the same time, either the physics server would crash or it would chug really bad.
I thought it was just. It would just.
Yeah,
chug.
I don't remember.
I don't remember there being a crash.
But I'm pretty sure we fixed that. There was actually
crash. We would have stayed.
there was
on.
an issue with teleportation when we started doing bot battles that Colin fixed a couple weeks back. So I'm pretty sure we've actually fixed that, and we were just actually talking
about retesting
earlier
it.
this week about retesting it. We've been really heavily pushing on client server stability and scalability and all of this. And as Tyler said, our goal for Beta 1 was 500, and we've sort of blown that out of the water. So we're starting to take a breath and go back to some of these other systems that you guys haven't
and we
seen
have
in
new
a while.
stuff. We got to get back to what was it all that? I really want to get back to all the changes that Brad did for buildings and get bigger buildings in and stuff.
Dreege L asks, will you keep the differences we had in Daok for the casting animations for each realm?
We would like to. For Beta 1, our focus is just to get like one good solid animation on each thing. So right now we're talking about just sharing everything. And like I said, once we kind of have an idea of like the look and feel and the timing and literally how we do the animation for the combat, that it works, that people like it, then we'll start working on permutations with confidence. Otherwise, it could very well be just wasted money at this point.
Yeah, that was that thing we were talking about earlier. Of at this stage, we're taking broad strokes so that you can see a guy casting and probably get a feeling for like that guy's casting a healing spell. And once we're happy with all of that, then we'll iterate. We'll dive deeper. We'll go more specific, and you'll start getting a feel for realms, and you'll start getting a feel for classes, and it's an iterative process.
And all of this, we are really doing a true Beta 1 where we are testing a lot of our fundamental tech. A lot of the goal was to hit a lot of the really hard things first, hence this 500 player concept. A lot of these really difficult things first, a lot of the core stuff that's hard, and even with the animation system being a difficult technical task to achieve, which we now have a great animation system, how we use it, the look and feel and how it works with the design of the game, that's going to be a changing thing for quite some time. So until we really feel confident that we've kind of nailed something, We don't want to spend a lot of cycles making a bunch of variations. Unlike a tree, now that we've got a fairly good idea of the poly count for a tree, we can make more trees. But I don't really want to get into too many variations yet for animation.
Skipping a couple questions that are not directed at these guys. Save those questions for designers or other people.
Or forums.
Dreegel wants to know, have you thought about the case where a guy puts a pine tree asset in the middle of a leafy biome? Will you force the pine tree to twist into a leafy tree?
I'm assuming, who's the guy in this case? I'm assuming a player.
I skipped part of the question. Will architects have access to biome game assets, trees, rocks, statues, etc., to decorate the surroundings of their buildings?
That is something we want to do. We haven't talked about it too much right now because it's just not a beta 1 focus, other than the difficult tech of just a performant building system in general and hooking it up to crafting and everything like that. We do want to give you access to things like, say, trees and stuff like that. If you shouldn't. Kind of depends on where we go with plots and whether you're allowed to freeform place plots or if you have to stick to a plot boundary. So some of that is undecided. Right now we have, and it also, a lot of this depends on tech, and I'm trying to remember conversations we've had. But right now you have a plot boundary. So in this case, you're not going to be able to go stick the trees somewhere else where there isn't a plot. So that's the answer for now.
Christian on the YouTube chat as a technical question for Tim. Do you use an actor model for handling the high amount of concurrency in the game? If yes, which? Or have you built your own system?
We're basically using sort of an event-driven entity actor model. It's all homebrewed. A bunch of it is based on immutable object graph stuff. We use optimistic prediction a lot with our server. But yeah, it's basic actor stuff.
Dreegel asks, what would be the differences on the VFX depending on the components chosen? Colors, types of particles, can you give an example?
Oh, yeah. So the one I'm more familiar with, since the one I just used as an example is just starting, was some of the Archer work that Mike kind of did a generic pass to. And if you look at the first pass, it's like generic fire.
So if you shoot like a flaming arrow.
Right. So in this case, it was, looking at the arrow component. And what we've done, if I remember the breakdown from the spreadsheet correctly, it was conceptually like generic flame. But then if there was another component that was kind of a fire-based component, then it would be a slightly different version of this or have a different trail. And part of this is to make sure that, like, if an arrow is either coming at you or you see it in the world, that you get an idea of, like, oh, that one's doing this. What you see is what you get is something we really want to do. So the tagging system just lets us make these more specific as we go. So yes, we will be slowly going through all those permutations.
And the same thing will apply there. Like if a Winter Shadow shoots a flaming arrow and a Blackguard shoots a flaming arrow early on, it'll just have the flame on it.
Yes.
Later on, as we get more specific, as we get more time to dive deeper into realm and class distinction, it'll start differentiating.
Right, and part of this requires testing, which is the whole point of Beta 1, because Mike could make some absolutely amazing VFX, and then we've got 100 people shooting them all over the screen, and everything crawls to a halt, and now we have to reiterate. We have to iterate upon 20 things.
Well, and even Beta 1, we want you to be able to know, like, oh, here comes a fire arrow. My fire resist is bad, so I should expect to take a big chunk of damage, and sort of get that feel for combat, even if it isn't as detailed as we want.
Yeah, we've made arrows that look different. So you should see the arrow model, and if you're quick enough and your frame rate's good enough as it blasts by your screen, you will actually see it's a different arrow model.
Broadhead or flight or
and
whatever.
Then the trails, the first pass was just one white trail on all of them, and now the trails are starting to change as we iterate upon them.
Odilvik asks, how much memory and processors are you using during these big bot tests to run the servers? Would it scale up if you added more, or are you hitting another limit?
There's a smattering of different servers, sort of that makes up what you guys call a server, and you may hear us talk about a shard from time to time, where a shard is sort of the conglomeration of all the servers that make up Hatchery or Wormling. Some of the servers, like and a lot of them can sort of be glommed together into one server, or we can pull pieces off so that we can scale them up better. And so, like the physics server that has to load all the pieces of terrain and all the pieces of collision and all of that, it's fairly memory intensive, but it's pretty light on the CPU. You know, and that guy for like the big zone, I want to say used 30 to 80 gigs of RAM. But it'll run on like an 8-core machine. The game server that runs all the game logic for skills and stuff like that, it's pretty memory light, and so we are very lax with how we use memory on the game server. And so it'll run, when it starts up, it'll run at like a couple hundred megs, and when we go up to like 2,000, 3,000 characters, it'll run at like around 10 gigs, and it runs like a full 36 cores. And then our proxies, which sort of sit between the game server and physics server and you guys, we run a bunch of those. I don't remember, I want to say those are like 8 cores, and they'll run like 100 megs of RAM. They're teeny tiny little guys that we just bring a bunch of.
Skipping some design questions here, going to Amber1 says, I read the newsletter. Can you explain a bit more and possibly act out the animation system, like the dual wield example and such? Will this make implementing new weapons and spells later much quicker? And is there any metric to that, like X times faster or something?
Yeah, I've done this. We do this all the time when we talk about animation. And this originally was pantomimed by Andrew when he wrote the new system. So his thing was like, oh, I can be, juggling balls in this hand, swinging a sword in this hand, running or skipping, and
singing a song,
turning my head, all these different pieces. So
that's a good juggling the balls motion.
Let's put it this way: casting a spell, swinging a sword. Basically, it allows us to. The system supports that, so it just depends on how we want to use it. In this case, the way we're using it right now is an upper and lower body, which we had before, but now we've broken off the arms. There's still more work that we want to do, and I mean, I swear to God, just like I said in the article, as we use this and come up. It's kind of just like with animation. Like the more you stare at it, the more you're like, oh, I want to tweak that, I want to fix that. It's the same thing with the system, where we're moving the character around and we're figuring out other little pieces we want to add to the system. But basically, the example that I gave in the newsletter was, we started your guy. We realized we needed an unarmed pose, because you could technically be in a combat stance without weapons in your hand. So we real quickly made it just kind of a guy standing there looking like he was ready for combat. And then what we did is we tore off, which arm did we do first? I think we tore off the right arm, and we said, okay, now I'm going to take all this animation and I'm going to put in an idle for holding a sword. In this case, we wanted the sword to look like he was in an offensive stance. So when Ben pantomimes this, typically from a more medieval, classic, realistic type of combat, one of the things we struggled with is you don't necessarily hold all your weapons out here looking like a badass in a movie. You actually kind of keep these things tucked in, just like a fighter's stance, and you don't really want to be swinging these things around because they're heavy, and it's inefficient. So a lot of these little movements with a sword were very close and we couldn't see them. So one of the things we needed to do was kind of add in a bit of the coinage of, or what am I trying to say, the term for like stage combat, where you can see. So that would be like, if I have a dagger, I could hold it here and go like this and kill somebody with it, but nobody else knows this guy is running around with his daggers killing people. So it would be more like, this. The movement has a little bit more movement to it. You can see that he's
exaggerate,
attacking.
and you exaggerate the motion, and that's
right.
one of the things is finding this balance between what looks and feels like realistic combat and what looks and feels like cool combat.
Right. And then you have to remember your camera's out here, plus you want to be able to tell what that guy's doing over there.
You can see that guy 4 kilometers away.
Yeah, well, not 4 kilometers. But it's going to be hard to tell that someone's, hitting someone with a dagger.
I'm pretty sure he's got a dagger.
Yeah. So since we'd kind of already tackled just kind of that feel of what looked okay and still worked for actually the movement, we had the sword up here for kind of an offensive stance. And then we go into the swing. So the first thing we've got to do is the idle. So now that he's got to pair up with this, and I'm doing my best Street Fighter 2 impression here. So he's got his sword up here, he does the swing, and one of the things that we noticed that with the torch movements was that if the arm was in a moving hold, so it was kind of doing this idle, let's say like this. Well, now I've got this other primary movement that's happening, and this becomes the parent, this becomes the child. So we take this animation we had previously, and it was going with this. So what ended up happening was you had this very static movement while he was idling. And our first supposition was that would work, and it didn't. We immediately all noticed that this arm didn't have a secondary movement. So when we actually figure out the tasking for this, it's this arm now needs an idle, this arm now needs a reaction to that swing. So when he does this, this arm has a little bit of a reaction. The cool thing is, now we take the sword away, and granted there's other things here like the jumps, the runs, all these other things, but I'm just going to focus on the swings. Now we take out the sword and we say, okay, you've got a mace. We put the mace in a different visual position so that it looks like you're going to clock someone, a crushing damage, kind of a blow. So it's not up here anymore, it's over here, so at least it looks different, and you can kind of tell what weapon the person is holding. So now when this person comes through with this swing, we can reuse this child animation that we had over here for the idle, and we can reuse it for the secondary animation when he swings, so he'll just kind of have a little bit of reaction. The next step is we peel this guy off, and we put a mace in this hand and a sword in this hand, and the next step is to make sure that these two are not going to be crossing each other a lot, mainly because one of the next things we're tackling is the skill system has 2 tracks running. The timing on those tracks are running at the same time. So you could have an ability queued up going on over here and another one going over here, and technically they could go at the same time. So this is one of the next things we have to tackle. Is Scott's should be soon. I'm trying to think of what where his priorities are right now, but he's got to put the sheet together with these different weapon combinations, and then we've got to kind of get the timings to go off at a similar time and just see what happens when it thinks it's supposed to be doing 2 movements at the same time. And then we're going to adjust from there. And then this gets more complicated because each weapon has a passive and active deflect and block. So while you're just standing there with your 2 weapons, if your deflect is up, say, on a mace in this hand and a sword in this hand, you will do a reaction and deflect some of the damage coming on you, and the same thing over here with this weapon. So we also want to make sure that plan ahead that these aren't going to be in the way of each other. And this may be one of those things that we're going to address in the system and in the animation, so we don't know based on the timing of when these 2 things occur. Do we want to make a unique animation? Do we want to offset the frame a little bit? We just kind of have to try those things out. That I think covers what I was talking about. Let me know if I missed something there. But it's a lot of just, we do this in the studio a lot.
One from YouTube. Seaton Luck asks, does CU use blockchain tech?
Blockchain tech.
I'm going to be ignorant on this one. Sorry, guys.
So it's Camelot unblockchained then.
Is this a thing that I don't know what blockchain tech is?
You don't know what that is. All right.
I mean, maybe it's a design thing, like in another game.
Dreege L has a question for Tyler. In the upcoming scheduled work you have to do, as far as world construction is concerned, biome, ambience, assets, textures, which is the one you're excited the most to work on?
So the joke I was just saying before we sat down was I've had a lot of limited time because I've been really helping out with the kind of the animation oversight and all the figuring out that we've had to do, and then a constantly changing, like, oh, we got to do that, oh, we're going to do this, oh, we might need this. There's been a lot of my time's been taken up with that. So that
and then me and Brittany being out.
Yeah, and then you were sick, Brittany was sick, or Brittany was out, and so The joke I was making was that I tried to stream yesterday and then had to do the videos for Mark, so I ended up pulling up on my screen materials that I had started working on 2 weeks ago that I still had not finished. So my time is limited. My primary thing that I am excited to do, not necessarily for being well, that's not fair. As an artist and as a producer and something we've got to get done, Ben and I kind of mapped out a better way with Michelle, not only a better way to art direct the environment assets, but a better way to build so that we weren't kind of building a pine forest. Instead, we're building pine tree 1, dead pine trees, pine type of, forest floor, dirt, sand, rocks, and kind of grouping these things into little subcategories so that other people could put them together in ways that we hadn't really planned. That's honestly the thing I really just want to have some quiet time to just sit, work on renaming things, setting up some new mods, and if we get that right, not only will that it will speed up putting together biomes, but it will also get us more variation out of the number of assets we have. So that kind of hits one of those, work smart, not hard. Because the previous way we did it, Michelle would be like, oh, actually, in the case of the pine forest, I just kind of said I'm going to make a pine forest, and I based it mentally off of fishing trips with my dad. And I built it all out, and I built that pine forest. If anybody wanted to make changes to it, they had to go into this file, which if you've watched any of the streams where I've actually worked on the mods, it's a big spider web of all these things, and if you haven't looked at it in a couple of months, you have to walk, mentally through it and see how everything works. So the hope is that doing all this work will simplify everything, and it's honestly the thing I'm most excited about. And I had Dion go in and just help me make more permutations of trees, so we don't have like 3 of the deciduous 01, we've got 5 of them, and we've got new dead ones and things like that. So we've just been slowly adding in some small things, and I say slowly just based on priorities. But the next big chunk I want to get through is just that reorg. And I'm excited about that. It's just not as creative.
Thaticus001 says, "Hey guys, thanks for doing this. At Tim, do you know if there are any plans to expose the character stats, skill progress, realm war status as a web service for other systems to consume?"
In general, the answer to that question is largely yes. About these specific systems, I don't know. We want to give you guys as much data as we possibly can for you to make really cool web forms and web services built off of our API, and so that you can scrape the data that you care about and present it to the people that you care about.
Like loved ones,
yeah,
or your enemies.
Yeah. Even if you care enough to show how much better you are than those Viking swine, then make a website that proves it. Obviously the consideration there is we've talked about stuff like not specific to this question, but some of the things we're sensitive about is how the immediacy of some of this data and the locality of some of this data. So for instance, if we had and we do want something like kill mails or kill spam with an API that you can get those out of, but if we gave them to you immediately with location data, player A kills player B at location XYZ, then if your guild really hates player A, you go to position XYZ and he's been in there in the last 20 or 30 seconds. So there's data about that sort of affects the shape of the realm war, that we are sensitive about how quickly, how often, and how specifically we give that data away. But in general, we want you guys to be able to scrape and share data en masse.
So you've gotten through most of the testing that we wanted to get through today. Do you have more? I was thinking of wrapping this up.
Yeah, the only
few-minute warning, folks.
Yeah, few-minute warning. We got to do the parallel stuff on Hatchery.
Yeah, let's go.
And then I think Dave and Gabe were working on the stuff on Fledgling.
Yeah, so we just need to check up with them. And then, yeah, okay. I want to wrap this up.
Speaking of wrapping up, do you want to? We could
switch out.
We could open the backer gift from Apollon.
Let's do that.
All right.
I'll switch out. So I'm going to switch out because apparently part of this gift is Max related.
Okay.
But I'm sorry. I was trying not to say he knows what's in there, which I guess I've done now.
All right. Well, I don't really. So.
All right. So if you have any gift-related questions, you can pose those to Max.
Or
All right.
more.
So backer
Well,
gifts.
If you want to know who Sigurd was besties with.
It smells like heaven in here. So I think this is a hat. This is an amazing hat.
If it's not a hat, it could be one.
I think this is for Andrew. So I'll just model it for the moment. That's amazing. All right, you want to try that? And then have some amazing coffee
From
Some really good smells coming out of this bag.
Germany.
from, yeah. It smells really, really good.
Oh, wow.
Oh my
Tim,
god.
you should really smell this. Too bad you can't. It smells great.
Oh, I can smell it.
Can you?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. And then I think this little cutting board is for me, which is fun and cute.
Oh, Zap. Zap.
That's cool.
Well, I want to know what that means, though. Does any...
I don't know what that means. It could be
shut
the
up.
artist's.
Let's see if anybody speaks
It
German.
could
or
be
if
the
it's-
artist's signature. Well, if you see Dark Society
Oh,
Network,
Zap is...
if you see Dark Society Network saying anything, then that's Apollon. And there's a card. I don't know if Apollon wants us to read this on stream or not. Well, I think it's okay. A fresh delivery of Hunick's finest espresso to keep y'all awake on your journey to Beta 1. See you online, Apollon and Artemis. Thank you, Apollon and Artemis.
So the coffee is already in demand. Matt wrote over in the West Coast. I assume one of those 2 bags of coffee is immediately being repackaged for mailing in Seattle, right? We should totally send it to him.
We totally should. All right, well, I guess that's it for this stream. So thank you all very much for joining us, and thanks to Tyler and Tim, the TnT team.
And Max?
Yeah, thanks to me.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm
doing
only
this
mostly
stream.
fantastic.
and we're going to be putting out the update, the weekly update. So look out for that email. There's no test this weekend.
Beta 1 update.
And
doc will be up.
the
if
yeah
it's not already.
the Beta 1 documents, the next couple of sections are up on the website already, and I'll be making the forum threads for us to discuss it in the forums. All right, that's it. I will see you later, and
I
turn
gotta
off
click the outro window. Where is that?
This should be
just the
exciting,
intro.
guys.
We just
It's
used
just
the
the intro
intro
again?
Yeah.
Hold on to your pants.
See you later.
Oh, there it is.
Thank you.